because one, I needed that mental break for that week.
It was all of a sudden like a wave of team of doctors and nurses kicked me out of the room.
Right? Like, of course I know it, but no one can prepare you for that.
It's like having a newborn and never getting out of that newborn phase, right?
Again, people are like self-care and type 1 diabetes. Like, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, yeah, it totally makes sense.
Hey Palmer fam, I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Nick.
And welcome back to the Urgent Lows with Palmer, where we talk about lifestyle and type 1 diabetes.
Here, we believe in embracing self-care through life's challenges. So today, we have an incredible guest. Her name is Michelle. She is a mom to not one, but two amazing daughters who both have type 1 diabetes. She is very connected with Touched by Type 1 and has done some amazing things. And so, Michelle, thank you so much for being here.
It is a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we cannot wait to learn more about your story, share about some of these awesome projects that you've done, and about your daughters.
Yes, they are my heroes for sure. So I'm really happy to talk about them.
Awesome. So let's get started from the beginning. As we said, you have two daughters with type 1 diabetes. Tell us about them and a little bit about their story of them getting diagnosed and all that.
So my oldest is Alessandra, and she was a toddler when she was diagnosed. But this is back in 1999. I was a young mom, and I had zero clue what type 1 diabetes was. To me, diabetes was an old person disease. You know, the grandmother who has a little bit of trouble walking, or that old person who gets toes amputated. That's the extent. I had zero clue that there was another kind of diabetes. So she was slowly losing weight, and, you know, it came to a point where she became very lethargic. She was still in diapers. Anytime I would put my baby somewhere, she would just kind of stay put, it's like the glow, who she was kind of gone. And I would pick her up, and anytime I'd pick her up, wherever she was, there was a puddle of urine.
Parker!
And, you know, so then it just kind of like, well, this is weird, you know, it started. And then my mother had actually traveled, and she was away for a couple months. When she came back, of course, you know, not living day in, day out, she really noticed the significant weight loss. And she said, my God, Michelle, something's wrong. And, you know, still not really seeing too much. But then when she became lethargic, when she just was not being her normal self, not that little toddler running around and active, almost, I mean, she was just gone. And it was this sadness. So then we took her to the doctor, and in 1 week, she was misdiagnosed 3 different times. Kept taking her to doctor. I took her, and then I know that my mother had took her again, and they just kept saying, this is a stomach virus. This is a stomach virus. And, you know, she was tripping over herself at this point. She was vomiting everywhere she was going. And I remember it was a Saturday, and I looked at her, and it just hit me so hard. I thought, something is so wrong. The doctor is not saying what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I had contacted my dad, and we drove to the hospital. We were in there. She's just laying on me. I mean, really, like, I hate saying it, but almost like a dead body.
Yeah.
I mean, she was just on my chest, no movement, no facial expression. And it was a PA who walked into the room, and he immediately noticed a fruity breath. And he said, well, this is one of two things. This is either malnutrition, which I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, or diabetes.
Yes.
And I thought, obviously not malnutrition. I mean, you know, and I thought diabetes. And I'm telling you, it was all of a sudden like a wave of team of doctors and nurses kicked me out of the room, at least 8 professionals in there. It was so intensive what they were doing to her. She was yelling and screaming. She was crying, and all she kept saying was, mommy, mommy. I am breaking down in the hallway. And I mean, they were doing IVs, they were doing catheters. It was very invasive for this little 18-month-old.
Yeah.
And then they came back and said she has type 1 diabetes. And at this point, I'm laying in the hospital bed. She's on top of me. Now she's really just done after going through that trauma. And I looked up at the doctor. I'll never forget this. I looked right at his face and I said, is she going to die? Like this is 26 years ago and it still gets to me. And he turned away from me and said, we're doing what we can. And that was the first time that I thought, I mean, you cannot describe that moment as a parent thinking, this is my world.
Yeah.
And because of being misdiagnosed over and over and these symptoms going unnoticed, here we are. And now we're going to have to fight for her life. And of course, you know, as a mother, you'll do anything, you'll give anything. And so from then on, boy, did our lives change. I mean, it was just a completely different reality, you know, and once we left the hospital and I went home, and I mean, I am nowhere close to being a nurse. I've never held a needle in my hands. And here you are, this little, to me, my little baby, an 18-month-old. And at that point, it was multiple daily injections. It was finger pricks. And again, this is back in 1999, so the technology was very different. I mean, how do you describe something like that? The impact was so tremendous, and the fear, the devastation, and at that point, not knowing what the future looked like anymore.
Yeah.
You know, you have your hopes and dreams. And, you know, when I started learning a little bit more about type 1, it was shorter lifespan. You can't have kids. You know, there's so many different things that life is no longer normal. And that was another component on top of the pain was, I don't know what her future looks like anymore. So you mourn that as well as losing that healthy baby.
Oh, yes. So traumatic. It brings me back to like hearing Nick's story with Parker.
Yeah, so much of your story reminds me of my story with my son where, I mean, first off, just the wet diapers. Always wet, always something going on. And then it was like, Parker was, again, like almost like dead. Like
a rag doll.
He's like a rag, trying to hold him, throwing up. You call the doctors. And again, it's that they say, oh, it must be just a stomach bug. Right.
For the flu.
Or the flu or something like that. And you know, just let him rest. And I just, the saving grace that I had was I had this little thought pop up in my brain saying, I need to say this to a doctor. And I was like, I have no earthly idea if this is related in any way possible, but he is wetting himself like insane. Like wetting through every single diaper, nonstop peeing. I don't get it. I feel like I just need to bring that up.
Wow.
And the nurse, because it was a Sunday, so I'm talking to whatever the nurse on call is. And the nurse gets quiet and goes, that changes everything. I go, wait, what do you mean that changes everything? That's not the answer I was expecting.
Yeah.
And they're like, I need to go make a phone call. I'm going to call you back, or somebody's going to call you back in the next few minutes. So like be next to your phone. I'm like, okay. And literally like 2 minutes later, my phone rings. I pick up. It's a doctor this time. Starts asking me questions and goes, okay, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Like, I need you to get your son up in the car. Do not delay anything. Do not try to pack anything, grab anything, like immediately in the car. I need you to drive to Arnold Palmer Hospital. Don't go to any other hospital. Go to the ER and say, we believe my son is a type 1 diabetic and he's in DKA and needs immediate help.
Yeah. Was that the same hospital you guys went to?
No, so we were in Bradenton, Florida. Right south of Tampa. And no, it was just a general hospital. But which, you know, we had good care there. Mm-hmm. But over the years, I learned real quickly, you don't go anywhere but a children's hospital.
Yeah.
There's stories there too.
Numbers were?
You know what? I don't remember what her numbers were.
Yeah.
I know that had we waited maybe another day or two, she wouldn't be here with us.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just that critical.
And that's how that was my understanding with my son as well. Like, it's devastating to know how close to death they really
Absolutely.
during that time. And the fact that people don't know. And that's one of the things I think with Palmer, and one of our, like, it's not like a public mission, but for us, because we know how often kids are misdiagnosed, that we want to tell people, make people more aware, because like you, no idea. I remember being in the car driving to the hospital being like, diabetic, like, mention type 1, like, there's different types, like,
Right.
you have no earthly idea. None of it makes sense. And so if we can educate, share, people have a little bit more understanding, and hopefully have parents know the signs, that maybe we can save a life at some point
Absolutely.
and make a difference, because it is crazy. Your story, my story, I hear it all the time. And it's crazy how many people are just misdiagnosed when all they could do, again, I know the doctors have a million things going on in their heads trying to help a bunch of people, but why don't they think about, well, maybe we need to do a blood test?
And so simple too.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, especially my oldest growing up, that they would do a finger prick for hemoglobin, I believe is what it was. I know it was a finger prick. And I'm thinking, that simple finger prick you just did, it's that simple to check for glucose. And I mean, if they come in, and especially if they come in more than one time, I'm telling you, in 1 week, we went to the same pediatrician 3 days.
Yeah.
How did it get missed? I do know that when we were in the hospital, she gave us a call immediately upon diagnosis and kept calling throughout the night. And I mean, you could tell there was a lot of guilt there.
Yeah.
And then I remember when I went back for a subsequent appointment, well checked probably, she's like, since your daughter's been diagnosed, I've diagnosed a few others. And so it was two-sided for me. I'm like, well, I wish you would have caught my daughter. But at the same time, I'm sure it was a huge wake-up call and a lesson for her. And now hopefully she wouldn't misdiagnose other kids the way she did mine.
Yeah.
And it, to bring it down to it being just such a simple check, these kids shouldn't be misdiagnosed, or it shouldn't get to a point where they're in DKA.
Yeah. We have these friends that their son, their youngest son, he has frequent urination, very thirsty all the time. And when she met us and we told him the story about Parker and Evie, she's like, oh, I've been constantly asking like our doctor, our pediatrician to finger prick him. And they do it because she requested it. Because she knew, I think it was somebody in her family, diabetes does run in her family, type 1. So she knew the clues and what to start asking for. So she goes in straight away to the pediatrician, is always like, can you please finger prick him and see?
Good.
And it's been normal, knock on wood so far. So,
well, that's wonderful. Yeah. And then my question would be, how many pediatricians actually have a glucometer?
Yeah.
I mean, do they? They all should, right? Have a glucometer that you get from free from the drug reps. So, it should be part of the equipment they have.
It definitely should.
Yeah, so let's talk about, so you said it was 1999,
that
right?
Was 1999.
So obviously technology's come a long way since then. So talk to us about that first night, first week of having this diagnosis. Like, did you get any sleep? Like,
I didn't get any sleep for many, many years. So, that brings us to my other daughter, Isabella, who, when she was 3, she was diagnosed. And so Alessandra was, I think, right around 12 or 13 years old. And she was completely different. She was diagnosed very early because it just so happened that we were actually out and we went to go celebrate something. So we went to an Italian restaurant. And she was complaining off and on about like these stomach aches, but that was it. And then we went very late one night and then we came home, and the whole ride home, we were about 2 hours away from home at this point. And the whole ride home, she's like, Mom, my stomach again, a little 3-year-old. And I just, again, it's that one moment in time that I looked at her, she's sitting in her car seat, and I thought, I think I'm going to check her. I have a glucometer clearly at home. And so we got home, put the girls to bed. I was pregnant, by the way. I was very pregnant. And we went, and my husband and I are like, oh, let's just catch the latest episode of whatever we were binging at that time. And then right before going to bed, so this is right after midnight, I said, well, let me just clear this off. I mean, I knew she didn't have diabetes. I knew it wasn't that. But I thought it's just, it's a check mark off what the possibilities. So I went, she was asleep. I pricked her finger and it was over 300. And I thought, oh my gosh, something's wrong with this glucometer. Honest.
Because it can't be
honest. I'm like, at that moment, it really didn't register. I'm like, something is wrong. So I called my husband. I said, hey, go grab the other one. And so he grabbed the other one and it read high. I'm like, these dumb, gosh, we barely use glucometers anymore, but these dumb test strips.
Yeah.
I'm like, these test strips, get me another test strip. So did it and it registered high. So these are two glucometers, two different, this other glucometer, two different test strips. And wow, it hit me. It hit so hard. And it wasn't that, again, I get teary again. It's so funny how we relive these moments. I mean, it's been so long ago, but you put yourself back there and it's just, as a parent, your heart and soul, you're just crushed all over again.
Yeah.
And so I was in a total state of shock.
Yeah.
Total state. And my husband, he had to walk away and I heard him sobbing.
Oh my gosh.
Sobbing. And at that moment, and then, which woke up our oldest, woke up Alessandra, and she's like, what is going on? And I mean, I wish we could have found out before and then eased into this, but it was happening right then and there, and told her, and she started sobbing and she said, not my sister. So they got situated, they were okay, and then there was the moment that I could break down, and I think I was about 6 months pregnant, and my whole body starts convulsing.
Yeah.
And how old was Bella?
She was 3.
3, okay.
She was 3. So again, our world was turned upside down. And so technology at this point, Alessandra, when she was around the age of 9, she got on an insulin pump.
Okay.
And at this point, there was not a Dexcom, especially not for pediatrics. And so when you ask about sleep, so she's diagnosed in 99. And at this point, we're still waking up. We try, obviously, we're tag teaming every 2 hours, but it's like having a newborn and never getting out of that newborn phase, right? Because you have to wake up. You cannot not wake up because of what could possibly happen, which has happened to us before, we've woken up with seizures in the middle of the night. So yes, many years of no sleep. And then Isabella was diagnosed, and we just had to learn again what the multiple daily injections, like how to do that. Just your mind to be put back in that state of mind, that mind frame of like, oh my gosh, take us back there again. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we're going back there again. Oh my gosh, again, a period of mourning, a devastation of, feeling like the ground has completely been pulled out from under you.
Yeah.
And then being pregnant on top of that, which was
So did you take Bella that night to the hospital?
So called my parents in the middle of the night. They were living, so now we're in Orlando, which is before we were in Bradenton, and had them drive 2.5 hours over. That night when it happened, I think Isabella pretty much slept through the whole thing. But my husband, myself, and our 2 girls, we all just got in bed together, kind of just like holding each other. And we needed that. Yeah. We needed just to hold one another, to be there. And as soon as my parents got to our place, we put Isabella in the car and drove straight to Arnold Palmer. And that's where that began. And she spent a few days in the hospital. And I actually asked them, I said, please don't let me go. I know what type 1 diabetes is, but I could not believe this was happening to us again. I could not believe, Alessandra having diabetes was supposed to be a fluke.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be, I had a very complicated pregnancy, and it must have been because of the pregnancy, so it was environmental.
Yeah.
never in a million years that I think I'd have another child with type 1.
Yeah.
So I actually asked him, I said, listen, as much as we can stay, let us stay. I just have to wrap my mind around this.
So then you're pregnant at the time. So does
And
your
I'm
mind think
pregnant.
like, OMG, now
And now I thought, oh my God, I'm 2 for 2.
yeah.
So I actually, that sent us into the direction of saving not only the blood, but we saved the cord,
Okay.
which was supposed to do, it's the blood.
Like the blood bank.
The blood bank, exactly. And the blood would be just for that particular person, right? So for that baby.
Yeah.
But if we save the cord, it could extend to more members of the family.
Oh, wow.
So then he's 13 years old now. And so we're hoping, you never know. At that point, stem cell was a big topic. And because that all happened, we saved it. But then it was always like, okay, 18 months old, 3-year-old. And now it's like, okay, will he be 6? Or when will that shoe drop?
Yeah.
But knock on wood, he's 13. And
do you randomly prick his finger?
Whenever he's sick.
Okay.
It's always in the back of the mind. Like if he's sick, if he's drinking a little too much water, I'm thinking, let me just check. Let me just check. But, speaking of sleepless nights, so Alessandra is in middle school and now I have a toddler and an infant. And I mean, we were very much alone. We were new to the Orlando area. We didn't have friends. Family moved or lived far away. And oh my gosh, I remember just one day I had to get up and maybe Isabella's like 4 or 5 and I went to go check her finger. I looked, I had checked my son's instead. And he was just there, like holding his finger. And I just remember looking up and I see Isabella here, Isaac's here, I'm checking his finger. I'm thinking, oh my God, I need sleep.
You didn't act like give him insulin. We've heard a story of our friend that she was at a sleepover and it was like the siblings both had, or maybe they had one sibling with it, the other one didn't. And the dad gave the insulin to the wrong doctor while she was sleeping. But
you know what?
Crazy things happen when you're sleep deprived,
right?
Well, there's a funny story though, where there is a time where one of the kids went low. This was probably about a year ago.
Yes.
I go and go get Gatorade.
Well, first I decided to paint our interior doors black.
Oh.
I'm like, let's be trendy. Let's do black. Because
I wasn't even going to tell that story. That's another good one.
Oh, I thought that was the way we were going.
No,
anyways.
We'll finish that one then.
Yeah.
So yes, we had just painted all the bedroom doors black and it was dark, so I'm not turning on all the lights. And normally my daughter's door is, cracked open, all that. It was not cracked open. I go straight, full force, into the door. There was a mark on my door. Went straight into the door. I about knocked myself.
It was like his entire face print was on the door. And I heard this noise, and I'm like, what happened?
So we got that one. But the one story I was actually going to tell is when the kids go low, I get up, I go to the kitchen, get some Gatorade. I come back. I walk back into the bedroom and I hold the Gatorade up.
Oh, yeah, to me.
And I'm like trying to give her the Gatorade. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, what? But oh my goodness, wrong person.
And he's like, with the straw, like trying to get it into my mouth. And I'm like, hey, like, what are you doing?
That really makes me feel so much better. I haven't told many people that story, but yes,
it's so true. I think we need to have a whole episode of what goes on when you're sleep deprived and what like type 1 diabetes sleepless nights, because it's a real thing.
Oh, absolutely it is.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I know, and I've talked about it before, that when I came into the family and we got married and we moved in together, I was so nervous about it. Like the nighttime stuff scared me like to death. I'm like, what happens if Nick sleeps through it? Like if it's a low, like what's going to happen? So we had I had my own phone alarm going off. We had multiple phones in our room all at once going off. And I think it was like 3 months in, I got shingles. I got the shingles. I wasn't sleepy.
Really? Yeah.
I was super stressed out. And yeah, my body was just like heightened with like stress. And I got shingles at, I think it was like 31, 32. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was horrible. Yeah, it hurt. But yeah, it's just like crazy things of like, and you really can't describe it. Like when we were dating, of course he can be like, I have 2 kids with type 1 diabetes, right? Like, of course I know it, but no one can prepare you for that. Like,
And no one can know it unless you live it.
Yes.
So, and that's the where isolation comes in, is that, of course we have wonderful friends and, they're always there to support us. But until you live it, the day in, day out, and not just for a few days, right? This is 24/7 and 365 days until there's a cure. So until you live it, which is why community is so important.
Yes. And that's one of the things that for us, I've talked about this on the podcast, where if there's one thing I could have done differently, because my son in April will be going on 10 years having type 1 diabetes. I never got involved. I knew one family who had a type 1 diabetic because someone, after Parker was diagnosed, said, "Oh, you should meet these people." So I had one friend who had a daughter who was older. I think you guys actually all know them. It's the Swartz family.
Yes.
Yeah.
So me and Brian became friends, but that's like, he was literally my only friend that I knew. But I was never involved with it. I didn't know anybody. So it literally was like, you felt so alone. And looking back, the one thing I wish I did was go get involved with the community. And, you're very much, we met you through Touched by Type 1. And we just absolutely love what they're doing because it is so community based. And you just said it all right there. Like, you need that community, because until you meet somebody who's actually going through it, people just don't get it.
Yeah.
And how so that's, and they don't, right? I can't blame them for it.
Right.
It's just so crazy that until you live it, you truly don't understand, and why you honestly just need to get involved with the community, like Touched by Type 1 or wherever you're at normal, because it is like,
well, I think that's how it came about for us, because me as a stepmom, I just felt so isolated. I mean, there was the whole stepmom component of it. So there's the outside noise where, there's not a lot of hype around it. There's more negativity around it. And then add in type 1 diabetes for both kids. And I would explain things or kind of like vent to friends, and they'll be like, "Well, you knew he had 2 kids. You knew they had type 1 diabetes." And it's like, yes, you're right. Like, I knew all these things, but no one could have prepared me for what the life was. And I feel like in those times of feeling so alone was when I was really like, "Hey, Nick, is there like groups that we can join that are type 1 diabetics?" And like, I started finding some on like Facebook, and then we got connected to Elizabeth through a business organization that Nick is in, because he met Jeff first.
Yeah.
And then the rest is history. And when we had dinner with her, and all we talked about was type 1 diabetes, and I was like, I've never felt more like understood in my entire life, and it was amazing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And even grandparents or extended family, brothers or sisters, they also can only understand so much. Right. So there is a lot of isolation, because even family members have a hard time understanding it.
Yeah.
And until actually we just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary, and this was the very first time my husband and I went anywhere without kids, because the grandparents, they obviously, want to be involved and do everything they can. But, when we celebrated our 10th anniversary, Isabella was in 2nd grade, and, that was still a very turbulent time.
Yeah.
So I couldn't expect my parents, who don't live near us and don't participate in our day in, day out, to come and help take care of her. So we had to take her on our anniversary cruise. So, anytime we traveled or did anything, we had to take the kids, because we couldn't put that on them, knowing that, again, if you don't know the day in, day out, you're going to feel lost, and you're going to feel scared too. So we couldn't do that to them. So
many people that we meet too, they're like, "Oh, we'll watch the kids, we'll help," and it's great, right? And then they actually get into situations. There was a funny story with your sister, who she's like, "Yeah, let the kids spend the night. I got this.
And I don't sleep anyways. I got this." And then the moment like one of the alarms started going off, she's like, "Rebecca, everything is beeping. I don't know what's going on." Because it's just scary. Like, the beeping noise, it's like daunting. It's scary. And if you're not used to it, you're like, and then add in another child with it. So both alarms, if it happens to end up like that, where both of them are going shift at the same time. Yes, it's very startling for anyone, but
absolutely. When I have Isabella, whenever her friends would come over to spend the night, because, she got involved with Dancing for Diabetes and so on, having that other child with diabetes, I'm already on alert, but boy, am I double alert. This is not my child. I don't know what your, rhythm is or how you're charting. And so then I'm like, oh, I really can't sleep now. So yes, and that's me with the experience. So absolutely, it's scary for someone else.
Yeah.
And then even just trusting people, right? Like even if you had a babysitter, even if you have like your parents watch them, it's not like you can go turn off your brain. Like you still got the alarms on. You're like on alert. All those things.
And I think that's really a big one that people don't understand. Like if we're going to, when we do have the kids, because we have them 15% of the time, we rarely do anything without the kids. Like when we have them and we like do it. But also like if there's an event that happens to fall when we do have the kids, I mean, we've had your daughter Bella babysit before, which has been amazing. That has been like the only time we were like carefree. But just this weekend, his parents took the kids for 2 days of like trying to help us out and stuff. And it's fun, but then you see the alerts going on. And then me, I'm like texting Nick like, hey, do you know why Parker is high? And he's like, no, I don't. And it's like, it's just...
It's extremely difficult to let go. I mean, it really is. And so to put in perspective, Isabella's 17. We went on this cruise. I'm still getting the alarms. And there was one night she was going very low. And I mean, I was just sitting there like, do I wake my husband up? Should we call his parents? Because his parents came and stayed with the kids. And I thought, I know they're on it. They know what to do. She's 17. I gotta let go.
Yeah.
For my own sanity. And I will tell you, when we got home and they opened the door, my father-in-law was shocked. He literally looked at us and said, wow, you guys look rested. Wow, you look different. I was like, yes. Yes, I actually felt it for the first time.
Yeah.
So that's, a whole other story that it's a necessity. It's not a want. It's a necessity to have a little bit of a break, to be able to escape. Again, building on the community. You got Isabella to come and babysit. You have to be able to have that brain break,
Yeah.
because it is. Anywhere you go, whatever you do, you're at work, you're getting alarms. That's your constant day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It is. And that's one of the things that we have really had to embrace for ourselves is that like our whole, again, people are like self-care and type 1 diabetes. Like that doesn't make sense. I'm like, yeah, it totally makes sense.
You need to make it.
Because if you are someone with type 1 diabetic or a caregiver, you're going to struggle with mental health in some type of way.
Absolutely.
And one, we need to talk about it. We need to be supportive. We need to be encouraging for all of us. But we need to hear the stories like what you just said about how important it is, because people need to know that, right?
Yeah.
You need to know that, okay, it's not going to be perfect. When my kids go to my parents' house, it was amazing. They spend the night that one night. They had them for 2 days. I know their blood sugar is not going to be perfect. It's going to be higher or a little bit more crazy than normal. And you have to be okay with that.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it's so hard to let go. And one of the hardest things that I think I ever had to do is that with the kids living in 2 separate households, I only have them 50% of the time. When they're not with me, there is nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
And having
That's
to let
scary.
go
Yeah.
of that was the hardest thing that I think I struggled with, because you're like, all right, is the mom doing what she's supposed to, on top of it, waking up, checking the low, all that? Why are the kids so high right now? What did they eat? There's all those things. And you just build so much anxiety. And so one of the things that we had to really do, and it was a challenge for us, is on the days that they go back, we have to actually turn the alarms off, the Dexcom.
Yeah.
And we still have the widget on our thing. Like every time I open my phone, I got the Dexcom widget, so I can see my kids' numbers. So it's not like I'm completely blind to it, but I had to turn the notifications off so I'm not getting the alarms all the time. Every time they went high, every time they went low, because one, I needed that mental break for that week.
Yeah.
Because we know how hard it's going to be once they come back.
Right.
You need that mental break. And every time the alarm went off, it just increased my anxiety.
Well, and it became such a bad spot for our relationship. Like, we were going to like couples therapy, and basically it was like an ultimatum. Like, you guys have to make the decision to turn off these notifications, or you guys are going to lose your relationship. So you got to figure out like the balance between it. Because when we had the notifications on, we didn't have the kids, then I'm going to Nick being like, what's going on? Like, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like him figuring out, when do I reach out? When do I not reach out? So it's just this balancing act that we had to do, and we've really had to figure it out. And when the kids do go away, I don't have any widgets on my home screen or anything like that. I just completely take it off. And then he still has it on there. But that was something I had to learn, like with the help of a therapist, of like, especially when I got the shingles, because she was like, before you were around, it was only Nick waking up for the alarms. Because my fear was always, he's not going to wake up for it. He's not going to wake up. There's going to be a low in the middle of the night. He's not going to wake up. And she had to like really drill it into me of like, no, like before you, it was just him doing it. Like at the end of the day, you're your husband's support, but he is the main one managing it, managing the diabetes. And you're just there as a support system for him, which was huge for me to like learn and like configure my brain to think like that for him.
Wow. I mean, that's something I had never thought of. And, you just layered another piece of that anxiety. I can only, and to let go. And that's your only option, is to let go.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, legally, there's nothing I can do.
Right. And
yeah.
I mean, as a parent, I feel for you. That has to be very difficult. Very difficult. And that's where I think, and it's so funny, you talk to my girls and both have night and day experiences with diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Because of a lot of things, because of community isolation and so on. Alessandra pretty much went up until late teenage years not having a community at all.
Yeah.
Isabella at a very young age got involved with the community because that's when we were introduced to Touch by Type 1. And the difference between the two is because we were so isolated with Alessandra, I didn't know how to let go.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I could let go.
Mm-hmm.
So I was that mama bear and never gave her a sense of independence to take care of diabetes and to be confident in her self-care of diabetes.
Yeah.
And then because of a community, when Isabella was diagnosed, when she was a toddler yet, I had a very good friend I met at that time, still very good friends today. And she had her daughter at the age of, 5, 6 years old, poking her own finger. And I thought, oh my God, what?
Yeah.
And she's like, no, Michelle, from young, you need to teach them how to take that responsibility. This is something they're going to live with for the rest of their lives until there's a cure.
Yeah.
And give them that confidence and teach them that. And, obviously you're supervising at that age. And I mean, mind blown for me, honestly. And so I started to, and so I hate to say this, but Alessandra went into middle school not having once poked her own finger.
Oh, wow. So was there like a specific time that that changed that?
So
like
I remember the school nurse in middle school, she's like, this is not, she needs to be doing this on her own.
Yeah.
And at that point I was kind of offended.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Again, just completely on her, and everything diabetes was on me, and I'm going to take care of her, and I'm going to save my child, and I'm going to protect my child. And I guess just the worst of the mama bear helicopter parent. And when I was around other parents, in particular, this friend of mine, Amy, shout out to Amy Sika, she did a lot to show me, no, let's do that. It's okay.
Yeah.
And if they make a mistake, it's okay, but let them grow up learning. And so creating independence like that, so that I know that whenever she is at a friend's house or she starts going places that she's not around me, it's like, no, she's got this. She's got this. And of course, phone, she can call me. She can look at her pump and at least say, Mom, this is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
This is how many carbs I'm having. This is what the pump is saying. And this is how I feel about it, So getting her involved in her care. So I think, going back with your kids is, I wish I kind of would have known that, so that I felt a little more confident to let Alessandra go and be normal among other kids and know that it's going to be okay versus being so protective out of fear.
Yeah.
And even now, this is something that we're trying to do with Parker, because he's now at the age, he's in middle school, he's 6th grade. He wants to go play soccer. He wants to try out for the middle school soccer team. And we told him that's great. We want him to do that. We're fully supportive, but we need you to take a step up with your diabetes. And he does a fairly good job with, he knows how to change his equipment and pick his finger and do all that type of stuff. But he doesn't do a very good job paying attention to his diabetes, and he's going low and all those type of things. And I was like, look, we want to trust you to go do this. I cannot be with you 24/7. I'm not going to be there after school every day to watch your diabetes. You're going to have to show us that you can handle it. And we're going to have to trust you that you're going to be paying attention to what your numbers are. You're going to treat yourself when you go low and catch it before you go low, because you're going to be out there being active playing soccer.
Yeah.
But you have to build that responsibility. And even now with Evie, we're like, yeah, we should probably see starting early, giving her more responsibility of, and even now with the kids, we'll tell them, hey, give yourself, 40 carbs for your meal. They do it themselves with their tandem, but they tell us, hey, this is how many units it says it. So we can double check, right? But they're the ones fully putting it in at this point, even my 8-year-old.
I think it's really the lows that we struggle with them, that both of, like, the alarms are going off and we're like, hey, did you know you're going low? And they're like, oh no, we didn't know. And it's like, what? Like, sometimes I think Parker's at that age where he can feel his body like changing or fluctuating. But yeah, like Evie, like the alarm will be going off and she's just like, oh, I had no idea. Like, it doesn't, in her head, she doesn't think like, oh, let me look at it and see why it's beeping type of thing. So yeah, we're definitely at that stage right now that we're figuring that out too.
The thing that we know you as, what we think you're the most famous for, is the Touch by Type 1 D-Box. You started it. We actually have one over here that you can kind of show off. And
it's your other baby.
And everything. We had Elizabeth on a few weeks ago and we talked about it there, but this was your brainchild, right?
Yes.
And so tell us about how this came to be, how to get started, and then even how did you get involved with Touch by Type 1?
Well, I'll start with how we got involved. Isabella was in 1st grade, and it was through the school nurse who came to us and said, hey, there's a Dancing for Diabetes. And I was like, oh, what's that? Didn't know what it was. And it was their 13th annual show. And this was the first show that Elizabeth and Kelly said, why don't we get some kids with type 1 diabetes, living with diabetes, to do a performance. And so Isabella joined. She was one of maybe 5 or 6 little girls. And yeah, so she was there from 2013 on. And that's how we started getting involved. And I just loved the passion I saw from Elizabeth. When you yourself are touched by type 1, when you're affected by it, there's a different component there. It's more than just an organization. It's more than just a program. There's that passion and that commitment to service, because you know what you're going through and you know the importance of community and to give back. So that's contagious. And so I definitely felt that, joined the board. And then from then on, we started growing other programs. And I remember I was actually at a walk for Seminole County, the school board. And Elizabeth and I, we were just talking again. Isabella was probably like 3rd or 4th grade. And we were like, how do we let the community know that we're out there?
Yeah.
And I said, how do we let the community know about us, and just to create a bridge for everyone who feels isolated? And I thought, well, why don't we have kind of our own little welcome version, or something to say, hey, there's a community. And most importantly, hey, you're not alone. And so got together with some other members of the community, and we sat down and we were basically the D-Box is like, what do we wish we knew when our lives were turned upside down?
Yeah.
Because I have no medical background, and I have a little baby, my daughter, diagnosed, and I'm sent home, and it's good luck.
Yeah.
And you're lost, and it's one of the worst times of your life. So we were like, okay, what do we wish we knew? What are tips and tricks? What are, again, with our experiences, what are the best products out there? What are the best resources out there? How can we let others know about, for example, my girls loved diabetes camp and the impact that's had on them. People don't know that these things exist.
Yeah.
And so I thought, you know what? And we're going to be just very forthcoming, open arms, and we're going to tell you what works, kind of thing. So then I remember that we went to a Friends for Life conference, and that's what I did. I went to the different companies that we knew that products tried and true is what I like to say.
Yeah.
And it started building up from there. And then when we would look at it from A to Z, well, what's missing, And so again, carb counting, isn't that one of the biggest things? Like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing here. What are good options? How do I balance out a meal and so on?
And the fact that you're carb counting and not sugar counting, which blew my...
Exactly. That you're looking at total serving, absolutely things that it's always been there, but it's like, wow, now how do I actually read this? How do I use this? And so got with a CDE nutritionist and together created a brochure. So again, from A to Z, all these different topics, all these different components of life with diabetes, we just created it, put it in a box. First thing, whenever you open it, it says, the most important message is you are not alone.
Yeah.
And, that's what we really want to convey. You are not alone. All your questions, all your heartaches, all the support, all the whatever it is, and that emotion, that spectrum, we understand. We know what you're going through. Let us help you on this journey. And it is a journey, because even this is at diagnosis. It's what I believe it's within the first year. I have to look at what the parameters are, but within that first year of diagnosis, you get this kit. It's free. I love that it's free. It's mailed throughout the United States. We have a Spanish version, and we also have gotten international requests.
Yeah.
And so we thought, okay, what can we do? We don't want anyone to be left out. Incredibly so, there are a lot of countries out there where really there are no resources. There is no community. Yeah. There's one family in particular that I know in Ireland, and that girl is joining our Dancing for Diabetes via Zoom almost every year, and joined in on outreach events that we had over the internet because they literally knew nobody, had nobody, and I think they would have to travel very far just for care. So then we created the digital version. So, it doesn't have all the goodies that you get in there, but all the very important information is in there. So it's a real source of pride, this program for me. And
Elizabeth said it's your personal hug to everyone. Yeah.
It is. It's for adults and kids. We have two different versions. So, diabetes isn't just about kids, and we understand that. My girls eventually grow up into adults. There are many adults who are diagnosed. I know I'm not out of the blue. So I say, my son, he's 13, and thank goodness doesn't have diabetes, but I know that I could be diagnosed with type 1 at any age as well. So it appeals to all ages, something in there for everyone. And, this is a passion project, and very proud that we're able to reach out to so many people.
Yeah. So special.
We are so blessed to know you.
Yes.
And know that everything that you've done for Touched by Type 1, your daughters are amazing.
I know you shared your beautiful daughters with us.
It's so nice to have you. And we're so happy that you came on this podcast with us. Now, we do have a little treat. This is not the end of the episode, because there is going to be a part 2, because now we are going to get to chat with the daughters. You probably heard them talking a little bit during this and us looking over because they've been sitting over there. But we're going to do a part 2 and get to kind of hear their side of the story. But they are such amazing girls. And like I said, Bella she's babysit for us. She has modeled for Palmer.
Yes.
And it is amazing.
You did an amazing job.
Yeah, thank you.
We're so happy that you were able to come on and just share what you did. And man, it's amazing.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. And it's also just wonderful to have, you guys part of our community. You have done so much. And, I tell everybody about Palmer because I love the passion that I see in you too.
Yeah.
And your company and your dedication towards your kids and your dedication of giving back. And giving back to the community, that's what it is. We're all together and there's the give and the take. And, that's a movement right there. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye, Palmer fam.
Bye.